Economist, blogger and founder of interest-free currency, the Florijn, Anthony Migchels, joins me once again. In this episode, Anthony's going to update us on the latest developments with the Florijn and how we can use interest-free currencies to reclaim our sovereignty. And how the international bankers use economic hitmen to enslave entire nations through debt. This is Eyes Wide Open with me, your host, Laurence Easman. As always, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Anthony Migchels, friend of the show, welcome back. Great to host you. Thanks for coming on.
Great to see you again, Laurence.
Yeah, you too. How is sunny Holland at the moment?
Typical Dutch winter weather, very pleasant, cold, blue skies, sun, so exactly as it should be. And actually, we had some skating ongoing here in the Netherlands a few months ago for the first time in years. And well, skating is obviously as quintessentially Dutch as you can get, so it was nice.
Okay, so climate change has arrived in Holland, does it? I mean, isn't calling it Holland politically incorrect now, isn't it? The Netherlands.
The people are crazy. I've said Holland since I was a little kid, and everybody thinks Holland, so I say Holland. But true enough, I mean, everybody needs to say the Netherlands now. But
Cool. Okay. Well, welcome back to the show. Our last podcast that we did must have been about 6 months ago now. Was really well received. Lots of people enjoyed it. Took a lot of value from it, and I know that people got in touch with you about trying to look into establishing their own currencies, because what we talked about in that podcast, we talked about the current financial situation. We talked about usury, which is a very arcane subject. It's a vital subject, and it's not spoken about very many places. And you're one of the key experts who understands usury as good as anyone. And we gave a good introduction to usury in that conversation. And you also discussed and told us about your own interest-free currency as a counter to the usury system that we're in at the moment. It's called the Florijn. Great name. Took me a while to be able to remember how to say it properly, but I think I've got it down now. And you introduced us to that. So I think today's conversation, I'd like to kind of pick up on those topics and develop them further and just have a general conversation about, the things that we're into and we like to discuss. And I know you've got some great news about the Florijn itself. So give us an update on what you've been doing, Anthony, since the last time we spoke.
Well, in terms of the Florijn, yeah, the Florijn is really booming. Well, yeah, booming, that's maybe a big word, but it's really growing very rapidly at the moment. And we're getting unbelievable feedback from people. And one of the things that we've been launching the last few weeks is, where did it put it? Is our paper money.
Let's have a look.
Yeah.
Where have you got it stashed? Wow, look at that. Yeah, that's amazing, man. Just move it over a little bit. There you go. Wow, look at that one.
Yeah, that's 20 Florijn, 50 Florijn.
Fantastic.
And we have 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and 50. So let me complete this bunch here, this collection.
Cash is king, hey?
Cash is king, man, and people want anonymous transactions. That's why this is really very important, and it's of course very concrete and practical, and something that you can show and touch, and people have been, they love it. So that's absolutely fantastic, and I must say I'm elated with these bills myself. They've been created by a very reputable designer bureau in Amsterdam, guys who really know what they're doing, and we have a very nice theme of these. For instance, I can just show you. I mean, this is 5 Florijn. Hang on. All these.
Wow.
All these bills are around the theme of crafts, the basic crafts that people work every day. Yeah? So this is care. So this is a hairdresser, and here you see a pedicure on the back.
A family business, hey.
Yeah. Indeed. Pedicure business. That was my father's business, and so each bill, and this is the one Florijn is about farming. On the back you see.
Awesome.
Yeah. So crafts is the general theme, and then every bill has its own theme, and which is expressing the people working, because that's what it's all about. I mean, we've been talking about usury and how that is the essential nature of capitalism, really, and that in our economic construct, people produce. That's the masses. That's the honorable way of making a buck. But you also have this making money with money stuff. So if you're rich, you just can put money in a bank and take usury. You can get into landlordism. You can go speculate on the stock exchange, and you create an income without producing anything. So there's a redistribution of production ongoing there. And that's how the masses are kept in poverty, in long working hours. This is how you create plutocracy, where the rich rule instead of the people who produce. And this is the very nature of capitalism. So our money is interest free, and it's really all about allowing people to produce and then consume their own production instead of financing the conspicuous consumption of the very rich. So
Tell us a little bit how the Florijn notes work, because I know you mentioned there about having an anonymous transaction. There's no third party involved, is there, when we exchange cash? Nobody knows what the exchange is other than the parties, and it should be that way. It's a private transaction between the parties. So how does the Florijn work in on a cash basis? How do people get the cash? How do they use it? How do they trade it? Where is its value coming from?
The basic mode of operation of the Florijn is that you basically go to a website and open an account. And once you do that, you can pay with your smartphone. You can pay with online transactions. Soon we will also have webshop integration. So people with webshops, small and medium business with webshops can allow you to pay with either the banking application here or PayPal or Florijn. And then since recently cash. And how does it work? You can buy some Florijn on our website for one Florijn is €1. So everybody knows what a Florijn is worth always. And then you can buy a Florijn for 95 cents. So that means that you get a 5% discount on everything that you pay.
That's good.
On everything that you pay with Florijn, which is obviously an incentive to pay with the Florijn. I mean, we want people to pay with the Florijn, and this is an incentive. And then once you have a Florijn in your account, then you can fill in a form and say, send me, for instance, 100 Florijn, and then we send you the Florijn on our costs, and you receive it within a few days at home.
So people who sign up to use the Florijn, businesses, private citizens, is they will sign up and say, okay, I want some Florijn. They purchase it off you for 95 cents for every one Florijn. And then they either receive a digital account with the Florijn in, or now, fantastic, you've actually got the cold hard cash, show me the money. And then they can use that in other places that have also joined the system of the Florijn, but they can't use it outside of that system.
It's it's a members only. So people can voluntarily decide to accept Florijn, and they have a very clear incentive to. Small and medium business have a very clear incentive because it provides new turnover, because it's the same as with all sorts of, for instance, air miles or whatever. Why do businesses accept air miles? Because people will be able to spend them there, and this means that they look on the membership list and then they go to that outlet, because that's where they can pay with their air miles. So there's a very strong customer loyalty function there, and that's what Florijn also offers. But it's far more, because air miles is, of course, very crappy money. I mean, it's very expensive, provides no credit, etc. But the Florijn is really intended as a high-end means of exchange. So we also provide interest-free credit to businesses. I'll talk a little bit about that next. But we have a very high-end means of exchange with all these different means of payment. So what I was just saying, cash and online payments, smartphone, soon web shop integration. But we are also, for consumers and businesses, we provide interest-free credit to businesses. Also to private people, but also to businesses, which is very important because there's going to be huge liquidity scarcity. We'll be talking about the coming crunch, but there will be liquidity scarcity in the economy in the years ahead. So we can provide extra liquidity where it matters most, at the base of the economy. The rich are never short of money, Laurence, but the common people are. So that's why we want to have cheap, new money that does not redistribute to those who hold money.
I mean, that's it. You made a few really interesting points there. One that stuck in my mind was the idea that money should be cheap. It seems like a paradox, doesn't it? Money should be cheap, but by making it interest-free and making it extremely liquid, how does money become cheap in that sense?
Well, usury is just a huge involves a huge amount of money. I mean, in Holland we have a 700 billion economy, and I think about the banks take in about 100 billion in usury per year, and that's only the direct cost, because all the other making money with money garbage that is ongoing builds on usury and on interest-bearing loans. For instance, if people go to a bank to acquire a mortgage, about a third of them here in Holland, we have a fairly large percentage of the population who buys houses. So 70% of the Dutch have a mortgage, basically, or own their home, but most people are, of course, stuck with mortgages. And but 30% of them are even worse off. They're destined to go. They're so poor that they have to go to a landlord, and which is even worse because obviously a landlord, you pay a landlord, and he keeps all the bricks. So that's very unearned income and very dastard kind of business, really. That's a completely exploitative, and that shouldn't exist in a decent economy. But it's very quintessential to capitalism. And but if you could provide everybody with an interest-free mortgage, if you can pay rent, you can pay off an interest-free mortgage. It's as simple as that. Everybody can do this basic math, and this is how a decent economy should operate, especially in this day and age, because usury came back into the Western economy 500 years ago after 1,000 years of interest-free economy under the Catholic Church. But there were reasons for that, and the key reason was that there was no mechanism for the provision of interest-free credit. But nowadays, the provision of interest-free credit is a complete no-brainer. It's very easy, very cheap to create interest-free credit with bookkeeping. Basically the same way that banks create money, but then without usury on the debt. And, the West, the key political, economic issue that the West faces, okay, we have many problems, but the key problem is our mega debt. And the funny thing about the mega debt that we have, because the West has 4 times GDP in debt outstanding, the funny thing about the mega debt is that we have paid more interest on the debt over the last 25 years than we currently have debt outstanding. So the whole debt bubble is blown on the basis of usury. So usury is so incredibly important, and the only solution to loans with interest is loans without interest. It's very basic, but very important to understand. So
I think that's interesting about the idea, because the way that the people who do usury sell it is that, it's inevitable. It's always been that way. That's the only way that you can have a proper running economy, because if the rich don't lend their money back into the system and they make their coin from charging you for renting their money, they sell you as if that's the only way that you can run a capitalist or a productive, prosperous economy. But like you touched upon there, is that usury was outlawed in Christendom for 1,000 years. So if that was the case, how was Christendom able to run as a really successful, prosperous civilization, building these incredible architectural marvels when there was no usury? And I think because they've got control over the narrative. And the propaganda is all-encompassing, isn't it? The alternative voices who are giving alternative ideas, like you are with the Florijn and interest-free currency, it's that the challenge is trying to be able to break the programming of the people we're trying to bring on board, because they just don't even have a conception that you can have interest-free money, because they're like, well, who's going to make any money out of that?
Yeah.
In whose interest is the interest-free money, if you like? So, yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, let me get into that, because these are really key points. So, and there was an issue in the Catholic economy, and also in Islam, because Islam also failed to provide interest-free credit. And this is really very key, what I'm going to say now, Laurence. But in the Catholic economy, there was interest-free. There was an interest-free economy, because usury was frowned upon heavily. So that was really a mortal sin, and you wouldn't get a Christian burial if you took usury, etc. But the result, and this was good, that there was usury prohibition. But what was not good was that they did not provide a mechanism to provide interest-free credit.
There was no solution.
There was it was good that usury was prohibited, but there was no liberal no mechanism of providing interest-free credit liberally. So there was the result of this was that there was credit scarcity in the economy, and this was a very, very real issue. And you had people like Francis Bacon, who was a Freemason, but he used this issue to then say we must have credit. And the rich won't lend without usury, so therefore usury must be permitted. And Francis Bacon was one of the most influential people of the 16th century in Britain, of course. And you had another figure who was John Calvin, very important figure in the 16th century, who was behind Calvinism, which was the key religion of the key capitalist empires, which was first Amsterdam, then London, and then New York. All these empires were Calvinist, Presbyterian in Britain and in the United States, but that's Calvinism as well. And Calvin, he managed to say that he did not consider usury forbidden among Christians.
So was he the one that was responsible for ending the prohibition that had been in Christendom for 900 years? Was it he broke the dam?
Well, he can't be blamed alone, because it all started in Italy under the Vatican in the 14th century. In the 15th century, you already had Medici popes. So Medici was, of course, the banking family from Florence, from Florence, and they were on the papacy. They captured the papacy in the 14th, 15th century, and they started undermining usury prohibition. And then in Italy, you had in those days a couple of very major banks, and banking is obviously the institution of usury. And but then it moved on to the north, and Calvin played a very important role in undermining the strong Christian rejection of usury. So he was a major historical figure in that respect, and undoubtedly operated by the moneylenders from behind the scenes, because that's how it works.
You mentioned Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Now, Presbyterian was the English version of Calvinism. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because William Paterson, the first governor of the Bank of England, was a Presbyterian Scot. Yeah, so it was like, the Calvinists had set up the central bank in Britain. And
this happened after the Glorious Revolution, and that was, of course, preceded by that aborted revolution by Cromwell. Well, aborted, he killed the king, so he had some success. But Cromwell was... he basically laid the foundation for what then transpired 40 years later under the Dutch stadtholder, William III for us and William I for you, I think, or the other way around. I think it was William I for the Netherlands and William III for...
Because there's a really fascinating part of history, is that, if I remember it correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, is that King Charles was opposed to usury and provided the bulwark because they first established the Whistle Bank in Amsterdam, correct? And that was giving the Dutch their empire to begin with. And the people who set that bank up had their eye on the prize, which was Britain. Charles was resisting all attempts for them to come in. Excuse me. Charles was resisting all attempts to let them come in, and ultimately met his demise, which is the only time regicide has happened in England. And then not long after, 40 years later, they got what they wanted, and which was the charter for the Bank of England, and we've been in debt ever since.
Yes, for sure. And the Cromwell was financed by the same people that were behind the Glorious Revolution, and a few years later, the founding of the Bank of England. But then, let me get back to this really crucial point about usury prohibition, because there was credit scarcity in the economy. And what happened next is that banking came back on the scene, because they won the moneylenders. That's what happened. And then they started lending to businesses. And this was very important because these businesses could then invest and create more production. And that is what we have seen under capitalism, that production did indeed started to grow.
Is that because of usury?
Because of the credit.
Yeah.
And this allowed for investment. But what happened is that the added value of the investment ended up with those providing the capital instead of with those actually producing.
Yeah, doing the work.
A huge rise in productivity, but the productivity all ended in the pockets of the moneylenders, and this is so incredibly important. And then what should have been done, and which could have been done in those days already, if people had the awareness and the wherewithal to do it, is create interest-free credit, and this could have been achieved by pooling savings. This could have been achieved in this way, because you were asking who has interest in interest-free credit. Well, those paying usury. Those are the ones who have an interest in interest-free credit, because they're getting bled dry by usury. And I was talking about 100 billion in the Netherlands, but we have 350 trillion. So 350,000 billion in debt outstanding worldwide. And that means that at 5% or so interest rates, we're paying anywhere between 10 and 15 trillion per year in usury to the banks worldwide. So, that is a huge tax by the moneyed classes on the producing classes. So the producing classes have and these are the 90%, 90 to 99%, these have a very, very clear interest in interest-free credit.
Of course. I think it's an important point about the creation of the Dutch Empire from Amsterdam, which didn't exist before the moneylenders arrived in Holland, set up the credit system, the usury-based credit system. Amsterdam boomed. Then they done the same operation in Britain. Britain boomed, and even went as far as creating the British Empire on the back of this system that they put in place. And then, the Federal Reserve came almost next in line, didn't it? And then we've seen this massive boom in American productivity. So there's something in this idea of that when they set up this credit system, it provides massive liquidity so that there is an abundance of money within the system, which creates the credit, that creates the productivity, allowing these great booms in wealth and prosperity. But that comes at a price, doesn't it? Because what they're saying is, we'll provide you with all of the liquidity you want. We'll put all of the credit into the system. But when we want to pull it out, we're going to pull it out, and it's going to be to our benefit. So it's, on the one hand, it proves that a highly liquid economy with credit can cause these great periods of prosperity. Yes. But the flip side is that it comes at a cost, because these guys who have the monopoly on creating credit and creating liquidity do so at incredible costs, because it's not just the money they pull out, it's the assets, it's the policies that they're able to create and to be able to manipulate entire populations. So do you think that we can achieve the same levels of liquidity and credit to create that prosperity, but without the usury?
100%. Laurence, and this is also, you can get upset about the usury thing, and I still get upset about it, and you know that I've been talking about nothing else for 15 years now, so I still get pissed off when I think about it. But that is, anger about the situation as is. But what we should also be focusing on is the immense opportunity that we have before us. If we can refinance the economy interest-free, then people can enjoy the wealth creation of capitalism without seeing all the wealth being transferred to the idle classes, because these people produce nothing. That's the sick thing of it all, and the production can remain at the base with the people that do the actual work. It's as simple as that, and that is what interest-free. That is the real promise of interest-free credit. We can have all the production that we would ever want, and we can have the production remaining at the base with the people that actually do the producing. So.
But they sell it. They sell it as. I mean, they sell it as this mysterious, arcane thing, which essentially they have a monopoly over the creation of credit and liquidity into the economy. But they make it think as if it's this deeply arcane, highly skilled, that you have to be a genius with numbers and crunching systems, and you need to have all this money in the bank, and they make it sound as if only they can do it. Right, that only they can do it. They're the experts. But what you're proving is actually, it's cheap to do, right? And it's relatively simple and relatively easy that we can create our own interest-free currencies. And you're the proof of the pudding.
Listen, money creation is really the easiest thing that you can imagine, and the whole operation of it all is. It's a lot of administration, and you have to do credit clearing, and you have to do the collateral and all these things. So that's basically very boring work. And I'm really not into this business because of that kind of work. But so that comes with some cost, but these costs are really only a minute fraction of the cost of usury, and it's all doable. If society realizes what is at stake, how they are enslaved by this money lending and these banks. And we all know that the banking, that the New World Order is the banking cartel. That's their main power base. Well, we don't all know, but you and I know, and plenty other people. So, and banking is the operation of lending at interest. That is what a bank does, and we need to create institutions that provide interest-free credit, so that that can be real democracy again. Because we also all know that states are heavily indebted to the money lenders, and the creditor is higher than the debtor. So the creditor is more powerful than the debtor. So the banks own the state and not the other way around. And that's a complete destruction of democracy and makes democracy a complete farce. I mean, we're completely under the boot of these bankers and creditors, and that's a disaster. That explains all the mayhem that we see, the lockdowns, the mass immigration, the poverty of the masses, the long working hours that we have, because we mentioned this last time, but it merits stressing, and that is that the common man in Britain in 1500, before banking came back on the scene in Europe, worked 15 weeks per year to feed his family, and he had 200 holidays. That's how we lived back then.
It feels like a long distant memory now, though, doesn't it? And at the same time, that the Industrial Revolution was promised as you won't need to work as long, and technology is going to take over, and you'll have more leisure time. Who was it? Was it Keynes? Was it Keynesian economics? Is that this whole push for more and more technology and mechanization and automation will free man up, so that he doesn't have to work in the factories as long as he's been working, and he can go back to his leisure and he can pursue art and philosophy. But the reality is we're working longer than ever before, even with all this technology.
Yes, that's the way it is, and it's all pure Orwellian crap. I mean, the only ones who got freed up and saw leisure were the very rich who were lending. So
because when musicians, for instance, the holy grail for musicians is to make a hit record and get the royalties, which they can live off for the rest of their lives. And it's interesting to the name, isn't it? Royalties. Royalties is to, you don't have to work anymore because you're receiving a payment forever, right? So that's what these guys are doing, is they're able to get this monopoly over credit that they have, that therefore they're not burdened by ideas of survival, and they can just live a life of leisure on the backs of our labor. How do you think that to get a monopoly has to be enforced with violence in order for it to be protected? Otherwise, the people will rise up and say, hang on a minute, you're thieving from us, we'll take it back. How do you think these moneylenders are able to exercise this monopoly over the people for so long? What do you think the mechanisms are in place there?
Well, one is mind control, because people adore the rich, and this is a very sad state of affairs. They think the rich are successful and work hard. I mean, it's the biggest joke that you can imagine, that the rich work hard. This is the last thing that they want to do is work hard. I mean, that's for us. But at any rate, they're so-called successful, and people don't mind if you plunder everything, as long as you get rich and can show off your bling, and people will like you and think you're doing well. So that's a huge blindness in the masses, and a really very grave problem with spiritual awareness of the masses, because there's a huge part of this is spiritual in nature.
But it's like, we talked about this. Sorry, go on.
Because the second thing that I wanted to say is that creditors have a huge sway over those to whom they lend, and this is also the case with states. So they have huge sway over states, and if one state rebels against their rule, then they can involve other states to enforce their loans. And this is what they've written in their texts. The creditors have their texts, and they've written about this in their books. And they will simply say, if this or that country comes in, starts rebelling against us, we will bring the guns of China or the US or Japan against them. So yeah.
Well, we see that, don't we, with John Perkins, who wrote the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, gave us a little glimpse behind the scenes. He revealed what's behind the curtain a little bit and explained how the CIA, or the banking cartel, it's probably the same interchangeable term there, isn't it? Right? They would go into third world countries and offer these, make them an offer they couldn't refuse in terms of these huge loans from the IMF and stuff. But the country taking the loan would have to stake actual physical real assets like the water supply or the electric supply or the taxes upon the people. That would be the security in order for the loan. Then, because they control interest rates, right, they would ramp up interest rates, put the country into default. They couldn't pay, and then they had to transfer the real assets. It's like, it's a simple game that they've been getting away with for a long, long time. Because it's not just third world countries they do this in. They do it here in this country. They probably perfected the scam here before they exported it to these third world places.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, in the first place, like I said, the British common man worked 15 weeks per year in 1500, and then and now we're bad off as it is today. But in 1900, your men in Britain, they were totally enslaved in these horrendous sweatshops and mines. These Scottish lads that they sent to the front in 1914. The Scots were even worse off than the English. These had to be beefed up because they were too emaciated to fight against the Germans.
From being in the mines.
They were just enslaved in the mines and what have you. So this gives you an idea. And Britain was then by far the richest country in the world. So that's how beastly this capitalism really is, and what scum these so-called elites are. They will starve you to death just to enslave you and motivate you to work, and this is what happened. Is still the same people rule, and
Well, I think usury is the story of slavery, isn't it? And I know a lot of people talk about, England set free the slaves and emancipation was granted, the chains were broken. But I think people miss the point here is that the slavers, the ones who are doing the usury, the ones who believe in slavery, that's their entire modus operandi, that is their ideology, it's what they live and breathe for each day, is how can we enslave the masses a little bit further today? What new techniques have we got to enslave them? Now, because binding a slave in chains is so obvious and it becomes the visual point of revolt and rebellion, it was given them more hassle than it was worth. And they give this idea that they emancipated the slaves, but they didn't. They just changed the mechanism from being physical bondage into debt slavery. And that one is even more powerful and more potent because most people can't see the chains that they're bound in. It's in the mind.
Yeah.
So they work. Slavery didn't end. It just shifted the mechanism of control.
Completely. And this is what capitalism really is all about, Laurence, and all the beautiful stories about free markets and freedom and yada yada. That's really for the peasants. So
Yeah, because that's when we talk about freedom. Well, what does that mean? Well, for me, my definition means freedom from slavery. It means freedom from the bondage that these slavers, or also known as bankers. I mean, I think slavers and bankers are synonymous. They're the same term, they're the same word because they're enslaving people through interest and through usury. That's.
To add to that, in previous times, under the Roman Empire, for instance, and previously, you would go into slavery if you could not pay your debts, which came with a very high interest. So there is a very hard and direct link between money lending and usury and slavery, very much so.
Creditor, debtor, they're again the same terms, aren't they? But they've been tweaked slightly to make them sound not as serious as slaver and slave, Yeah. Okay, I could talk about this all day, but let's move on a little bit to the situation we find ourselves in right now, which is this constant drip through the media about this cost of living crisis, about inflation driving up the price of basic supplies like food, and the general benevolent news that everything's going to collapse. We keep hearing about an economic collapse that's coming, and I've heard it for a while now. I'm not sure whether that's just part of the fear, but you've got an interesting take upon the debt bubble that we are in at the moment. Would you like to explain that to our audience and in terms that laymen like me could understand?
Yeah, let me show you a pic because the pic has more than 1,000 words. So let me look that up very quickly. And that's when the gold window in the United States was closed. And since then, debt has been growing with between 6 and 8% per year over the last 50 years. And this goes on only until 2012 here because it's interesting that it's hard to find these graphs for later years, and it's also difficult to make them because these data are not so easily obtainable. But what you must realize is that we're basically way above my screen already in 2022. So this has only gone out of hand even much worse. And this short dip that you see here is the credit crunch, 2008. And this is interesting because in 2008, what really happened in 2008 was that debt plus usury, interest on loan, became unpayable. That's what really happened in 2008. And since then, we've had 0% interest rates in the entire West for 14 years.
Wow.
So that's unique. If you look at 500 years of capitalism since usury prohibition ended, then you will see that interest rates in Europe have been around 5% in long-term average. 14 years of 0% is just never unheard of. And that means only one thing, that we were broke, and that we've been on constant life support by the central bank since then. But this allowed debt to continue to grow. So it became debt plus interest became unpayable in 2008, but debt itself could continue growing until quite recently in 2020 the next bust came. But what we have here now is 4 times GDP in debt. The US owes 90 trillion in debt. Here it says 60. That was 2012. Now it is 90 trillion in debt, and US GDP is 23 trillion dollars. So that's literally 4 times GDP is total debt in the United States. And this debt is entirely unpayable. And if you realize that if your debt must grow with at least 6% per year, and the reason why it must grow is because if the debt doesn't grow, then we have immediate deflation. We need 6% money growth, otherwise we have deflationary pressures taking over, and then you see that the economy starts to falter and falls into recession and even depression. So money must grow, and if it doesn't, there's recession. But if you have 90 trillion in debt, and this must grow with 6%, that means that you must borrow 5.4 trillion in 1 year just to keep your economy going. And the US economy is only 23 trillion. So that's 1/4 GDP that your debt must grow each year now. And that's 6% is conservative, but with 8% the numbers are even worse. So that means that we need to borrow 5.4 this year alone to keep the economy going. But if we have 3% economic growth in the United States, that means that the economy grows with about 600 billion, Laurence. So there is 600 billion in new economic activity if the economy grows with 3%, but we need to borrow 5.4 trillion to finance this growth.
So when you said there the money supply must grow 6% a year, otherwise there's deflation. And just let's get into the weeds a little bit on that. Is it growing 6% in order to maintain the usury payments?
Yes.
And then if it doesn't grow 6%, then that means the usury payments still have to be paid, but it's taken liquidity out of the economy, and therefore that causes deflation. Is that a correct understanding?
That's completely correct. The only thing that I have to add is that there is also economic growth. If you have 3% economic growth, your money must grow with 3% as well. Otherwise, you have less money for more economic activity. So, but these two things, the interest payments and the economic growth, need to be financed, and that's indeed what causes what forces the money growth in the West. And otherwise, we have recession and depression. And you can see this very clearly. If M2 starts dropping or starts growing less than 6%, and drops to close to zero, then you immediately have mega busts. Like you can see this in 2008, but also previously with the dot-com bubble that busted, and etc.
So the 6% growth that is required for each economy in the world is that is the whip that keeps the Western governments focused on finding ways to ensure that this 6% growth at least continues. And is this why we'll see them conduct these more and more desperate policies and more rape of the population, because they've got to hit these targets? Because if they don't, it goes into deflation, the government collapses, and all hell breaks loose. Is that kind of what's motivating the guys to do what they're doing?
You totally got it, and this is the driver because behind all the insanity, and this is the people don't get this, but this is what is going on. And what we have now, for instance, is that the banks are so powerful now, they can dictate governments, because they need so much money to keep these economies liquid. And they can just dictate. And one of the ways that they dictate is say, well, you have to keep importing more people, There's a very direct link between this, because they say, we will give you the money, but you must do this or that. So import these people. You must tell your children in school that they need to be gender neutral. You can get money if you invested in green energy instead of fossil fuel, so-called. This is the kind of stuff how the that the creditor forces on Western populations, with this ever-expanding need for more and more money. And it's also coming to an end now, because the numbers that I just showed you, that the United States must borrow 5.4 trillion to finance economic growth of 600 billion. That's completely unsustainable now, and really at the end of the fiat system.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's this constant need for growth can only grow so far, because it grows above and beyond what can be produced physically. Yes. And there's no more countries to rape. There's no more countries to pillage. There's nothing left to keep this bubble, this debt bubble that you're talking about going. Now, what's on the other side of the debt bubble when we can no longer pay? Default happens. What comes next, and how does that serve the bankers who are driving the debt bubble in the first place? Or are they just so consumed and intoxicated on this ever-expanding money supply and the money and power that brings it, that they don't really plan for what comes on the other side of the debt bubble?
Well, let me first totally rebut the last suggestion, and I know that you don't really mean that, but that you're just asking it. But no, they know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is they are completely ruining the West. And the fact of the matter is, people still don't get where we're at the timeline. But we are very close to world government, and the final ascent of the New World Order and its world government has begun with the lockdown, basically. And the lockdown was associated with heavy money printing as well, to keep that bubble going for the last few years. But what's coming next? What's coming next now is that they're going to stop debt growth. And they're going to do this in various ways, because they're going to force a new gold standard on the world. And the fiat system was aimed at inflation, because we see the trend. That's inflation, more and more money. But gold standards are used by the banking cartel to create deflation. And they're both lethal monetary diseases. Inflation with more and more debt. Deflation leads to catastrophic depression and a large-scale impoverishment. And what's coming next now is that this. Let me go back to this chart, because we see this eternal growth, but that is going to be stopped with this gold standard. And they're going to do this with this gold standard that is being forced upon us by both the BRICS nations, because they're planning on implementing a gold-backed and gold-based CBDC, central bank digital currency. That's what's next from the BRICS, especially Russia and China, of course, who run the BRICS. And but also the ECB is going to back the euro with gold.
So how does that? Sorry to interrupt you there. Just if you can explain how gold creates deflation. What's the mechanisms behind gold creating deflation? Because didn't we run on a gold-backed system for a long time and it was relatively successful?
Well, let me stop share here again. But well, successful, you can say successful, but let me tell you how successful it was for the bankers, because they installed the British economy was financed with tally sticks during the medieval era and beyond. And when the Bank of England was installed in 1694, as we were discussing, the first thing that the Bank of England did was create a gold standard. They installed a gold standard, and they destroyed the old money supply of the British kingdom. There was a kingdom at the time, and later under the Bank of England it became an empire. But so they destroyed the tally stick
system.
Yeah. And what then happened was a long-term deflation in the British economy, which did allow for which also redistributed very strongly from the working people to the rich, because what happens on the deflation is that money becomes worth more, which is very pleasant if you have a lot of money, but it's not so good if you are in debt, because the deflation increases the value of debt. Because money becomes worth more, the debt also becomes worth more. And so there was a huge redistribution ongoing, and this lasted over centuries, Laurence. And this led to these extreme working hours that we saw in Britain in the latter days of the empire, say 1880 or so, when the common man literally worked 80 to 100 hours per week just for sustenance. So from 50 weeks per year to 100 hours per week. So that's what deflation caused in the European and British economies in those years. And but what it is going to create here is that it's going to end debt growth. And then we were previously discussing that the debt has to grow, the money supply has to grow with 6% per year to finance economic growth and interest payments. But then this can no longer be financed with extra money. So then the interest payment starts eating away at the money supply, and this creates deflation. And this deflation next means that the debts will grow in value, and it will lessen economic activity. And if the economic activity starts lessening and it starts becoming less, then debts will become unpayable. The mega debt that we have outstanding will become unpayable. And then we will see more and more deflation, because if the debt becomes unpayable, then the money that was created with the debt also ceases to exist. And there will be more and more and more deflation, and the whole debt will start collapsing, because we also saw this with the crypto holocaust the last 2 years or so. That if they use their collateral for these cryptos as to loan among each other, and then these debts could not be paid, and then the next also defaulted. And this is what the great concern is, that within the financial system, once the defaults start, if the one debtor can't pay, then the next can't pay also. And then next and the next, and it will start cascading throughout the entire financial system, and the whole debt will implode. That is the great concern and the key cause of what is coming in the years ahead, in the implosion of the debt bubble. And this will really, it's unspeakable what this is going to do to the West.
What we're seeing in the news frequently now is, in the UK at least, is the Bank of England's announcement that they're going to run with CBDC. Was that the right? I forget the name. In 2025, is that the the Bank of England is going to launch digital currency, and that seems to be what they're going to foist upon us. They're going to force it upon us. They're going to remove cash from the economy, and they're going to be using digital cash that the Bank of England will control. Is this what's on the other side of the debt bubble? Is this the plan? And what does that mean? Can you give us a bit of insight into this whole new digital currency that they're trying to bring in?
Yeah, this is an absolute huge consolidation that is going on in the banking cartel. And the Greatest Depression, which I call the Greatest Depression, which is coming as a result of the implosion of the debt bubble, that's really going... I can't stress enough, the destruction is going to be massive. We're going to see huge population decline in the West, throughout the West, especially in the UK and in America, if all signs, if the signs are correct, but also in Europe. And it's going to be worse than the Soviet collapse, but there's also going to be a huge consolidation and a huge worsening of bank money tyranny, because this CBDC, the central bank digital currency, how they are going to implement it first is, if we can't pay our debts, then the banks are going to go bust. And if the banks run the current payment systems, if you transfer money in whatever way, then this is operated by commercial banks. And if the commercial banks cease to exist, and are consolidated, and the debts are consolidated in states and central banks, etc., then they will also lose control of the payment system. And then the central bank digital currency will be wheeled in as a solution to the problem that they created, because problem reaction solution is always how they operate. They create the problem, the debt, then the reaction default, and then solution CBDC. And the CBDC will be a heinous tyranny because this is programmable money, and the central bankers will start deciding on what you can spend your money and on what not. And this is really very grim. And you know what they want? We will own nothing, and you'll eat bugs, etc., etc. That's what they promise us, and they're not at all. And the way they're going to achieve this, because this is the key thing. People have been talking about these heinous lines by the World Economic Forum, but nobody is talking about how they're going to do it. And this is how they're going to do it. And then they will give you CBDC, and people will be forced into it because the payment systems of the banks are going to go bust, going to be destroyed. So people will have to pay. They will need the CBDC. Also, there's going to be mass default in the West with mass unemployment, mass poverty. The government will dole out a little basic income via the CBDC, which you then can spend only with major multinational corporations that are a part of the control system. And there you can buy your bugs for sustenance.
I'll pass on the bugs. Thank you very much. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom, even though it sounds like it is. I think in those type of situations, that's when cash becomes contraband, doesn't it? You know, actual physical cash actually becomes contraband. Eggs become contraband. But let's talk a little bit about solutions, because that's the master plan, the diabolical genius master plan by the banking cartel. I don't think it's all going to go their way. I hope there's going to be some divine intervention. And what are your thoughts on solutions? Because I know the Florijn is a solution. You know, you're offering an alternative to this usury-based system of theft and slavery, which is interest-free cash that gives us liquidity, that gives us the ability to trade with each other on a much more efficient basis, and therefore we can create prosperity without the cost of usury being on. So the Florijn is one solution. What other ideas have you got? Because this is a white pill show, right? We talk about black pills, but we always talk about ways that we can combat it so that we're not demoralized, that we can take action in some way, shape or form, even if it's only little steps. So give us a little bit of your white pill, Anthony.
Yeah, well, you know, there's both. So I will give you the white pill, but the black pill is really very real. I mean, people, you know, and the reason why I come with the black pill is because I want to motivate people to prepare.
I'm not against the black pill. I think it's reality, and I think it's important that we talk about those things. But at the same time, we've always got to think about, okay, well, regardless of what's coming, what actions can I take to prepare so that when it comes, it doesn't hit us as hard, and that we can react accordingly because we've thought about these scenarios in our heads.
Exactly. So, you know, the black pill is the scenario of the bankers. We need to deal with it. And there are many steps that we can take to prepare for ourselves and our loved ones for what is coming. And the first thing is to know the problem and to understand the grimness of the situation. The next step is to start preparing. And there are a number of key issues. In the first place, the commercial banks are going to go bust. So if you have savings in the bank, then you're unprepared. And what they're going to do is when these banks go bust, there's going to be no more bailouts, because in the last bailout that we had in 2020, we saw inflation going totally through the roof. And this is the reason why they can't print more money. So they can't bail out the banks anymore. And the next, what was going to happen next is bail-ins. So the banks are going to confiscate deposits, and that's how they're going to cover their own losses. And
where would you suggest people put their assets that are in banks then? Where's the safe spot?
Yeah, you need to get out of the bank. That's a key step. So if you're a pensioner, if you have some investments in the bank, also paper markets, like don't buy any crap on the stock exchange, all that stuff. Liquidate all that paper-based value. You need to get out of the paper-based speculative economy. And the best thing to do is buy some silver. Don't buy crypto. We've seen what happened to crypto when the Fed started deflating. The crypto lost 90% of its market capitalization. And many people were just burned very heavily by the crypto demise. So what you need is silver and not gold. I'm not against the what is coming as gold standard. So gold is definitely going to appreciate hugely in the years ahead. But I think there is a significant chance of gold confiscation. That's the main concern. And silver is the poor man's gold. So and there won't be will not be part of the monetary heart of the new financial system, but it is very strongly related to gold, and it's also a good store of value. So if you have some savings, buy silver. That's really very important. Next, lower your cost of living. All this bullshit that people are now used to, thinking that you can get. People are so stupid, they get themselves injected to be allowed into the McDonald's and go on a vacation. Okay, people listening to this show will be wiser than that. Lower your cost of living. Do not blow away the little funds that you have now on stupid consumption. Start saving, start living a frugal life, lower your cost of living, lower your debt. And you can also just default on that. I mean, but then of course you will have to deal with debt collectors, etc. So find your way in that. That's for everybody.
I can help with that if anyone needs help with that.
Yeah. You have experience with that, and that's very good.
Yeah.
But lower your cost of living and start doing some savings so that you can put away a bit of silver left or right because that for a rainy day and there's going to be plenty of rainy days in the years ahead. So do that. And third, become far less dependent on major outlets. You need to stop buying from multinationals. And I'm really very serious about this. Even if they're more cheap, if they're cheaper than a small and medium business, you need to stop buying from multinationals for many reasons. In the first place, these are the power base, together with the banks, of finance, of the World Economic Forum, of the New World Order, because the New World Order is about capitalism, capital, finance. These are the New World Order types, and they are taking our life force and we are bringing it to them, and we need to stop that. So we need to buy with local business. Local business are our neighbors. Try to find people that you can relate to, that you can trust, and start buying from them. You need to reroute your supply chains to local suppliers. Farmers also very much included. Here in Holland, we have parallel economy. It's happening everywhere. People who know what is coming, who have a basic idea of what is coming, because you need to become less and less dependent on the system, because otherwise you're going to be forced into the CBDC, and that's when they have got you by the balls. Then they will blackmail you with your need for food and the most basic essentials of life, and that's what you need to avoid. You need to have provisions from sources that you can rely on and who have a similar outlook on life as yourself, and you do not want to be blackmailed and come under the thumb of the power grab that is coming, because these people, what they have in mind for us, they are going to debase us until we are bugs ourselves. Okay, so if you want to do that, then keep buying with multinationals and keep your money in the bank and keep voting. But if you do not want that, then you need to disconnect from the system and reroute your supply chains.
Awesome.
And then fourth, if you have energy left, do what I do, start a local currency. Because what we are facing is a deflation that you cannot even begin to grasp. And what we need is local money in the local economy, because you can buy silver as a store of value, but silver is complete trash money. It's the specie, gold and silver is bankster money, and it creates deflation. Once you spend a silver coin into circulation, it is going to be gone forever. It's never going to return to you. But if you spend a Florijn or a local currency that you create into circulation, that money keeps circulating in the local economy. Nobody is going to save a local currency, but everybody is going to get rid of it as quickly as possible, because it's soft money. But they can only spend it in the network, which is is a network of people that have similar outlooks on life and who you want to work with. And it stops the drain of usury. It creates new liquidity in the local economy while we have a huge deflation ongoing, which is a money shortage. And you can save assets with silver, but you must not spend silver. You must use silver for instance, as a collateral for an interest-free loan in a local currency. That's how you need to go to use your silver once the day comes. If you have this energy left, there's nothing better that you can do to help your brethren than starting a local currency.
Awesome. That's a fantastic plan and really well delivered and explained. So let's wrap up now. But as we do, let's talk about that final point in those 4 pillars that you've just shared with us, which is about starting your own local currency. It sounds difficult on the face of it, but the reality is that your system, the Florijn, which is built upon mutual credit, and mutual credit being a really simple way of people trading amongst each other in an interest-free economy, but your innovation, which is the Florijn, is also transferable. You can people who are interested in setting up their own local economies or local currencies, after listening to this podcast as well, is that if they want to set up something similar to the Florijn, you're prepared to share the technology that you have invented and created with the Florijn, so people can, in a way, franchise the Florijn into their own local community and start a network in that manner. Tell us how people can do that.
Yeah, so the issue here is that local currencies are good, but the basic architectures for these currencies are often, always lacking. And I've been into monetary reform for 15 years, and I've very deeply investigated all these currencies. And I came into this business because I'm a hardcore anti-banker man, and I've always been looking for the final solution for usury. And this is not the case with many monetary reformers. They are half-baked, and the currencies that are out there, the monetary architectures that are out there, are half-baked. And the key issue is, the core issue is that there are 2 basic architectures, and the one provides for currencies that are convertible, and others is that they can provide interest-free credit, but they are not convertible. And these 2 beasts exist. But they are both incomplete, because we need currencies that can provide interest-free credit that are also convertible, because both functionalities are really very fundamental. And then you have you need another couple of set of best practices that I've also very clearly described on my website, and that are all part of the Florijn and the talent. And the talent is what I call the basic architecture, and which you can use to implement currencies like the Florijn, which are very complete. They are convertible, they provide interest-free credit, they are ready for paper-based money, smartphone payments, online transfers, webshop integration. They are legal, which is also very important, because I've had problems with the Dutch central bank in the past, but the system that I've devised is not illegal, and therefore it is legal, because anything that is not forbidden is allowed. That's a basic legal concept. So these are the key issues that the Florijn and the talent have solved. And indeed, we are willing to work with serious people. Don't call me if you just want to waste my time on a nice chat. I mean, I'm too busy for that. But if you are serious about this, then yes, I can coach you in implementing the system. And I do this with several people at the moment. We're going to expand our franchise with 2 networks, one in the Netherlands, one in Ireland.
Fantastic.
And I'm also involved with a couple of people in Australia who are very serious about building something. And I do charge some costs for the website, but that's simply because it involves programmers who need to create it for you. But it's not for profit, and I'm definitely not going to get rich from this, Laurence. Nobody has to worry about that. But it also creates a small threshold, because I can't waste my time on people with good intentions, but not the wherewithal and the fortitude to move on with this, because obviously you need a bit of balls and a bit of energy to get this going. So, but yes, I'm willing to work with these people. Yes, definitely.
Awesome. So if people want to find you, Anthony, where is the best place to contact you and look into it?
Realcurrencies.wordpress.com is my website. That's where you can read all my articles about interest-free economics, about false economic paradigms, about the current financial crisis. And the Florijn is www.betalenmetflorijn.nl, but that's Dutch, of course. But that's
I'll
also
post the link. Yeah. And you got Twitter as well?
Yeah, I post mostly in Dutch because previously I was always internationally oriented, Laurence. But since the lockdown, I realized I need to focus on the Florijn now. So I've been tweeting a lot in Dutch. But you can use Translate if you want to follow my comments on the economy, which are state of the art. So.
Cool. I highly advise Anthony's blog. Brilliant. Educated me deeply over the years, given me great insight into the whole banking scam, usury, economics, and what's happening with the monetary supply. So yeah, I highly advise that. Thanks once again for coming on. Hopefully this is going to be a semi-regular occurrence where we can get the latest update, the latest black pill from Anthony Migchels. And also we can talk about these great solutions, especially how individuals can take control of their lives, can take control of their communities by setting up your own local currency. It's possible, it's simple, it's cheap, and it's within reach of everybody, and I might have a little go of it myself. We'll see how it goes. But Anthony, thanks again. I'll speak to you soon. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Laurence.